What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I do want to go over the Motorfest update schedule versus the Crew 2's update schedule and how they are different from each other, or how they are actually going to be fairly similar in like some of the main dates of the updates. So the first thing here is going to be the Motorfest season updates that were obviously on the third one, and then apparently season 4 is going to be like extended 1 month or something. So instead of being around 3 months, it's apparently going to be 4 months, which I would say that's probably not going to be the best thing for the community. At least many people might not be the biggest fan of it. And there is something I want to ask you guys right off the bat here before I go into the timeline of the Crew 2 updates. Are you guys actually happy or satisfied with the Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3 updates in Motorfest? Is there some things you would rather change about it, or would you actually just like to see more stuff in these set updates, like different events or all kinds of new things besides just adding new vehicles and stuff like that? I do understand like each update's going to be around 2.5 to 3 months, or each season's like 3 to 4 months or something like that, but I do feel like a lot of players, even though getting more updates might not always be a better thing, and sometimes spreading the updates out farther and getting bigger things in them might actually be a better way to do it. Again, guys, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But moving over to the Crew 2 release schedule right now. So the first thing, that game, guys, came out on June 29th, which is going to obviously be a pretty interesting release date. Also coming out in 2018, by the way. Crazy how old that game is, even though it's not that old, being a little over almost 5 years actually. Going on 6 this coming June here. But that's going to come out on June 29th, guys. The first update in that game came out on September 26th, which was the Gator Rush update. That one was actually pretty dope. Again, I am going to go into a separate video of the bigger updates in that game that did end up coming out, basically releasing all kinds of things, including new classes. Pretty insane. But the Gator Rush update coming out in September is actually going to be around a 4-month window of a release, so it's obviously a bit farther. Technically, it's actually not going to be all that farther away, though, because if we think about it, that is actually going to technically be 1 month past what a season in Motorfest would end up being, even though like the Season 4 update is going to be around 4 months, so that's actually pretty accurate there. The next update, though, guys, came out on December 5th, which was the King of Mayhem. Crazily enough, that was 1.5 months later, right after we actually got the other update. That one actually hit the game right after that, also introducing a lot of stuff. Honestly, I'm probably going to make the update video right after this one, guys, going over like the size of the updates in the Crew 2. It's honestly pretty insane the stuff they were adding into them, and I would say like a lot of players can argue that the game was bare bone or all that stuff, but either way, there are still going to be a lot of updates being added into the game and also adding all kinds of stuff into it. The next one after that, though, is probably one of the bigger updates on April 24th. That is actually going to be the Hotshot update, which was around 4.5 months after the other one. That is obviously a pretty big window, but the difference with that update, though, is they did end up adding more stuff into it, like a summit. That was the first time the summit was added into the Crew 2, so it's obviously going to be like a new thing. That's obviously a pretty big update. But again, guys, 4.5 months later, and that is around 1.5 months after, let's say, one of these seasons in Motorfest. So is it really going to be that much of a difference, like with the overall update, like schedule? I would almost say it's probably a no. Like, that is a pretty big thing to add. Like, you're adding an entire summit. That is like an entire game mode into the said game that you can actually play, and also bring everyone together weekly, which a lot of games don't obviously bring you on it weekly, unless you look at something like Destiny. The other one I did want to mention, though, is going to be the Blazing Shots on November 13th. That update was actually 6.5 months after the Hotshot update, which, to be honest, would probably make a lot of sense. Like, you're releasing a huge one like that with a lot of content. You're also releasing all kinds of things like summits, all kinds of new things you can actually do, like events, new cars. So it is probably going to give you a solid 5+ months of actual things you can do in it. And then, of course, add another big update, bringing on like new game modes, all kinds of new stuff in November. And then there's one last update I did want to include here in this video, and that's going to be the Inner Drive that was on March 25th. That one was actually going to be around 4.5 months after the previous Blazing Shot update that was in November. So there is going to be a bit of like a difference there with the updates. Like, you can probably see some are going to be 3 to 4 months, or you even have another update coming out around 1.5 months later, bringing you even more content you can actually mess around with. Whereas a lot of players are looking at Motorfest, looking at some of these seasons, going, okay, so we have the main stage, we have a few new events here. Personally, guys, I'm going to be honest, My favorite update in the game so far, which obviously there isn't a lot of them here in Motorfest, was easily Season 2 in the game bringing us the Hoonigan update. That one was awesome. I love that like island thing in the grid park you can mess around with and stuff like that, but Season 1 was honestly kind of bland. It wasn't all that. Season 3 is pretty dope, but I really do think they can actually give us more stuff in these updates. I'm really hoping they are planning it, and we are most likely going to have a big update hopefully in July or something like that for Season 4. Bring us all kinds of stuff like maybe more PvP events. Who knows, maybe even a summit overhaul like the one video I mentioned that kind of needs to happen as well. But it is kind of crazy looking at the timeline of updates here in the Crew 2 compared to Motorfest because, well, you're noticing around 3 to 4 months, which is fairly similar on the updates. Even one once again coming out 1.5 months afterwards. Then you have 4.5 months for like a bigger type of update. And then after that you have around 6 or so months for even a bigger update bringing you more content. So I guess if there is enough content in those updates, they obviously can bring, enough time similar to like a Destiny update. Don't attack me in the comments on that one, where you might actually have like more stuff you can do for a few months, then boom, another thing does come out. But one thing I have to admit right now though, looking at the current timeline of the updates on Motorfest compared to the Crew 2 where we have like 3 seasons here, the last one was in March, the next one's apparently in June or July, whereas if you were looking at the Crew 2, sure it was going to be a 4-month window of an update, then 1.5 months, then you have another 4 months. It's actually not going to be all that far off, guys. Like for example, Season 3 to Season 4 in this game, we are going to be around a 4-month window of stuff, so I'm really hoping Season 4 is going to be a big one. I almost would have to say it has to be, because if it isn't, I don't want to say it, guys, but I do feel like Motorfest is not going to be in a good place with that player base, to be honest. And the other thing I did want to mention, though, is do stay tuned for tomorrow's video going over, like, the update sizes in the Crew 2. Like, yeah, they were around 3 to 4 months apart, guys, but I found it pretty insane what came out in them. Keep in mind, I also did start in the Crew 2 a bit later, but doing research, it was actually pretty dang surprising what came out in those updates, and I feel like a lot of players are going to look at this and go, wait a second, all of that stuff came out in that update? Like, what? Also, guys, do let me know your thoughts on the entire timeline thing in the comments below. What do you think about these season updates? And what are your thoughts about the updates coming out in the Crew 2? And how do they compare to Motorfest?